This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gyro Drilling. They provide world-class drilling solutions for all types of projects. They specialise in auger, aircore and RC drilling. Head to the team at Gyro Drilling for all your mining needs and see how they can help you with your upcoming project. Hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. As this podcast grows, every subscriber helps. From those of you who watch this on YouTube or to those that listen on Spotify and Apple, every follower helps. If you do this one favour and hit follow on whatever platform you find us on, I promise I will continue to look and find fascinating people across the world and bring their perspectives to you. Thank you and enjoy this episode. Hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. Welcome to episode 100, the milestone. Joining me today, I spoke with him last year, is Joel Kandiah, the history of money. We spoke last time, if you want to go back and listen to that, plenty of the history of currency, the evolution of banknotes, and a whole lot of fun with a few bloopers. And I do know this time you haven't brought the cash notes to spill water on, so welcome back.
No, thanks, Ben, and congrats on 100 episodes. It's really awesome that you've actually achieved. It's a big deal to get 100 episodes, let alone one episode out. So,
I know
well
it feels a bit surreal, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend to speak with me on
That's
it.
all right.
But we're talking a lot today about currency and I guess the evolution of from an investment / hobby and a lot of factors that are coming into play. But can you just remind, I guess, the listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and more so the history of money and that sort of concept?
Yeah, so I've been collecting currency since I was 5 years old. Now I'm 34, so I've been collecting for a good 29 years now. I've always been fascinated by the history that banknotes and coins depict. They tell stories of countries. Actually, and for some countries, it essentially acts like a marketing tool. Like we know that the $100 bill in America is so quintessential. Everyone can recognize it from a mile away. So they do tell different stories, different histories, different aspects of civilizations, and so really like in that I really get fascinated by all those kinds of things. So I guess what I do with the history of money is to tell those stories. I think a lot of people get fixated on how much their coins and notes are worth, and that's fair enough. Because people might think they might find something in their pocket that could be worth a lot more, but in reality, I try and get people to take stock of what they've got on them and sort of think twice, have a look at the note, have a look at the coin, and feel that tangibility, because now only 13% of transactions are now in cash, according to the RBA. So it's becoming harder and harder. And so I'm also a high school teacher, and I ask my students a lot, it's like, when was the last time you held cash? And they're like, not for weeks, months. And usually when they do get cash, it's when they get maybe a birthday present or something, or Christmas present.
Yeah, their grandma or grandpa sent them a bit of cash.
And it'll just go straight to the bank, or they give it to the parents to put straight into their bank accounts and whatnot. So we're losing that tangibility and aspect. So I feel, for me, my job is to remind people about the history and psychology behind, I guess, physical currency.
Yeah, we talked about it last time, the cash supply and demand. It's more about how people use it.
Yep.
And, you flash back to the pandemic when cash was associated with, transferring germs. And then it was a great almost excuse for a lot of companies to completely move away from cash, and some have never come back. But it's all driven by demand and the usage.
Yes.
And I think we could probably start with really the gold and silver acceleration, and the price of gold is now over two and a half, or closer to $2,500 US, and in Australian context it's a lot more. Same with silver, breaking out from that point of view. But I think we wanted to talk about how that market is influencing some of the coin collectible market. So do you want to talk us through a little bit of that dynamic?
I'll go from about the 2020, 21, 22, where, coin collecting started becoming a big thing again in Australia, where, I guess people like me and a few other creators sort of made a deal of there's some physical currency that could be worth a bit more than it is. And so a lot of hot money poured into that, where we saw values just shot up crazy. So like, for example, the 2012 red poppy, which is the first coloured coin
I
in
remember
Australia.
seeing that. Yep.
When in 2020, its value was only about $100 a coin. And by the end of 2022, it was pushing $420 a coin. Jeez. So it was insane. So all this hot money was just pushing through. A lot of collectors were trying to, I guess, like FOMO was a big deal, but also a lot of people who sort of, like the sneaker bot community and a few others were like trying to get in very quickly, turn a quick profit. And then the Royal Australian Mint was getting on there trying to do new releases to take advantage of that. but forgetting about the sustainability of the hobby since. And now because I guess interest rates have significantly gone up, people's mortgage repayments have gone up. I guess, a third of Australian population has a mortgage now. And, on average, most people's mortgages have been up by $1,000 a month. So those people who are investing, or I say investing in a very loose term because I feel those people didn't have an idea what they were getting themselves into. They've been burnt to the point that prices have fallen about 30 to 40% in the last year because the demand's simply not there. Yeah. So a lot of people, it's now a buyer's market in that realm. But because on the other hand, we're seeing large amounts of uncertainty, war breaking out, all those kinds of things globally, that the price of gold and silver has pushed up significantly. And what we're seeing in the collector market and pushing to an investor market is that people are now buying a lot more gold and silver coins. We're looking at, pre-decimal coins, where, pre-66, Australia's coins were either 92.5% silver or 80% silver. Gold sovereigns are 22 karat gold. There was a coin in 1980. There was a $200 coin that was released in 1980. Early on, that coin was actually had its face value worth more than its gold value. But in the last year, that coin used to be worth about $650, $700, is now pushing $1,000, and just purely on gold value. So what we're seeing now is anyone that's actually now putting gold coins up or silver coins up for sale, they're getting snapped up very quickly. And I think maybe it's partly FOMO. I don't know what the outlook for gold and silver is. Some people are saying gold might push $3,500, $4,000 US an ounce, which is insane to think about because especially if the Aussie dollar is still falling at the moment, that's pushing $6,500 an ounce. And so I think some people are trying to gamble on that. I can't speculate what the movement is, but we're seeing high demand, especially the Perth Mint have put out press releases saying that demand is very strong, especially in the last 6 months. So people are moving away from those collectible $2 coins and whatnot. Some people still want them now because it's cheaper than it was a year and a half ago. But people are now buying gold and silver bullion and even gold and silver coins just to sort of partly of the collectible value, but mostly due to as another form of investment.
And we were talking before, the actual silver edition in the coins was eliminated, 1967? Yeah, so a long time ago. So then these coins that are now being, I guess, collected either from a point of view that, intrinsically I want to hold them or for that bullion price point. I mean, what is the sort of market for that? Like, how much is there currently in the market? Was a lot of it sort of lost or melted previously? I mean, where's the bulk of it even hiding?
A lot of silver coins are just hiding in collections, essentially. And essentially, so you got people who have got big giant hoards who are passed down from parents or grandparents, whatever, are being matched up with investors, silver investors, gold investors and stuff. And those investors are just buying up what they can find at the moment. And just like anything that pops up, if you see the Facebook groups or you go into a coin dealership, they're struggling to get stock at the moment because they're just like buying. But also there's a lot of selling happening as well because people are also taking advantage. So the buy, sell, even at such high prices, people are still buying.
Transacting.
Are still transacting. So there's a lot of movement that's going on, a lot of liquidity that's going on that if you do have gold and silver right now, people are going to snap it up straight away. So people are now emptying up their collections, selling them off, and investors are swooping in and buying them. But again, obviously, there's inherent risk. In Australia, when you're investing in gold and silver, you're not betting against the silver price. You're also betting against the value of the Australian dollar. So if the US dollar price of gold and silver increases and the Australian dollar depreciates, that's the best case scenario for us.
Yeah.
If the gold price depreciates and the Aussie dollar appreciates, then that's the worst case price scenario. So, and I think a lot of people who are trying now get into gold and silver are sort of forgetting that they're betting against, not just the gold price or silver price, but also the fluctuations of the currency.
And from actually getting these coins, I mean, I sort of think of like, potentially eBay and some of those sources where I can actually imagine some people being taken advantage of from not actually knowing the quality or what's actually in the coin. But I mean, the markets and I mean, this distribution network, whereabouts is it and where do people go to, I guess, transact and exchange these coins?
I guess there's a few different ways they can go about it. So there's a few trusted Facebook groups that happen at the moment. They're backed by sellers, have to provide ID. The ID is stored in a external drive. So Australian Specialty Coins is a coin dealership that runs a Facebook group. They do that kind of thing. That's one avenue, and they're generally pretty trustworthy in that. People, like sellers, have to be verified, and they got to go through a rigorous process before they can sell on the Facebook group. The second part is your actual coin dealers who've got physical stores. So They're usually represented, or they're part of the Australian Numismatic Dealers Association. And so they're very trustworthy, and they essentially engage in a lot of buying and selling straight because they're coin dealers. So that's nature in their part. And the other part is going straight to the perf mint and people just selling their collections of buying, because they do buy jewelry now, they do buy coins and whatnot. So going there and selling it and getting your price for it is a pretty good way of going about it. So you got quite a few options, quite a few trustworthy options where people can engage in that market.
Yeah, and I mean, talking there, we'll go through the RBA side because I'm quite curious. But you said before that 13% is now cash, and I mean, if we look back at, we've talked about it, that's been dropping quite significantly over a period of time as more people just Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, or just transact with their debit or credit cards. But I mean, where do you see potentially that future of cash and currency fitting into it? As we talk about the rise of even cryptos and their usage in the real world, and we'll talk about it, centralized digital currencies or centralized banking digital currencies. Where do you see cash and coins fitting into this potential future world? Yeah,
I think cash is always going to be printed. It's always has a backup system, unless there's a foolproof way to, I guess, back up your digital systems when the payments are going through. Cash still needs to be around. And both the RBA and the Treasury have said cash will continue to be printed for as long as it's required in that. So even if, let's say, cash usage goes down to 5%, there's still going to be an amount of cash that's going to be printed because they need to ensure that if systems go down, that there's a backup system in the, if, let's say, a cyclone hits far north Queensland, all your internet systems are out.
Or we've seen it with Coles and Woolies some days where the power goes out and then there's just, we can't even get your fruit and veg, and there's panic.
Exactly. And last year, Square went down across the world. And so has businesses. And businesses need to be prepared for this because there's a system, there's a risk that their internet line could go down or the bank system could go down, that businesses should have a set amount of cash on them so that they can continue the business. So what we saw when Square went down last year is that businesses were closing up because
they couldn't do anything.
It's like, and if you don't plan for failure, you plan to fail. Essentially you fail.
Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Yeah.
And so it's beyond me. So I think cash still has a role to play. How big of a role it has in the payment system will depend on how quickly we accelerate. And I think due to the market share and market power of those big four banks who are able to drive those technologies, closing branches, reducing the amount of ATMs in there, it becomes sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where, people don't want cash, we'll reduce the ATMs, but people want cash, or so they can't get cash, so we'll keep closing branches in there. So it just rolls and rolls and rolls. So I think we're going to still see that as much people, there's a loud minority of people who are fighting for cash to continue, and I think that's fair enough. That people still want privacy in their transactions. People still want accessibility. People use it. Cash is a great psychological tool, especially when it comes to budgeting and stuff. People will still use it. Just how many people use it, it's going to vary. It's like I look at my generation. I'm 34. We grew from a fully cash society into a society now that's all this. When you got the digital natives, the Gen Zers and all them now who just only known digital forms of payment. So I think that's just going to accelerate that even further.
Now, the point about the banks, I've gone through the frustration now of having local ATMs and bank branches disappearing and even the headache of trying to get certain amount of cash out and the whole system is almost geared against it. But all it takes is really people to transition. And we still see cash payments coming in so many forms and there's that beauty of having cash on you. And I mean, you would know full well about all the different currencies and the stories, and you sort of lose a lot of that as soon as you transition to an FPOS or a digital currency. And one of the interesting points that you sent to me was about how the RBA is making itself, I guess, still relevant within, not just necessarily printing cash, but finding ways to think outside the box. I mean, can you talk us through a little bit about what they've been doing to stay at least ahead of it, but staying relevant within these evolutions? Yeah,
there's been a work in progress over the last 5 years of looking at the feasibility of a central bank digital currency. And they've done many studies. They've done studies internally. They've done small trial groups internally. They've done a combined project with Bank Negara Malaysia and South African Reserve Bank as well. So looking at cross-border transactions in a central bank digitalized, I guess, backed system as well. So there's a lot of small pilots taking place and they're looking at the feasibility of it. And essentially the problem is, and we see such large distrust about CBDCs essentially, is that just no one's communicating about it. There's no one. There's all these.
You hear the
RBA
governments are doing it or whatever, and then no one really knows.
There's no information, and no one's communicating that out there. There's big discussion papers that RBA posted on their website. They did one this week as well about security and safety regarding CBDCs. And so because that communication is not happening, that transparency is actually there. They're just not communicating. It creates distrust in there. But that aside, what people need to realize with CBDCs is that it's no different for you accessing money from your bank card, your PayPass, your Apple Pay, whatever. The only difference is that money stored in an account that you have with the RBA. So it's a claim against the RBA rather than a claim against the banks. So the RBA can print whatever amount of digital currency they want. You go on your phone or whatever, you access your digital wallet. Your wallet is actually essentially a bank account with the RBA. So in this paper that they recently released, it's more so asking people, how much are you willing to pay a year to have a bank account in the RBA to access that money directly from the RBA rather than going for intermediaries? So the CBDC is essentially taking the middleman, which is the banks, essentially out of the picture so that people can actually use that money straight away for whatever purposes from there. So, for example, you get paid from your employer, that goes straight into your RBA account, and then that money comes out for there. And so that also removes the possibility of a bank going insolvent because it's a central bank. They're all going to have infinite amounts of money they can print, especially physically or digitally in that. And it's going to be, and they said that physical banknotes and coins will complement a CBDC instead. So like a banknote is a claim against the Reserve Bank, a CBDC is also a claim against the Reserve Bank. So when it comes to that, in terms of when they ask people, would you pay a certain amount? And they gave certain scenarios. They said, will you pay a certain amount if another bank had your information? Would you pay a certain amount if Austrac had information to what's in that account? Or would you pay a certain amount so that no one knows what's in there? So essentially, it becomes an anonymous tokenized system where people just take the money from their RBA account and spend it without being tracked or whatever from that. And I think that's what people want.
Are worried. Are they worried about that, the tracking? Because that's my, devil's advocate is, you hear about these central bank digital currencies and everyone draws their conclusions about if it's good or bad. And I think there's honestly open for debate on it. But I mean, there's a lot of, from the devil's advocate, fear about that progression of everything is then therefore tracked. And you look at some of the systems that are in China, and I haven't been there to see it, but that sort of digital scoring system and all these sorts of fears that it doesn't necessarily translate to a democracy. And is that, and that's where I see cash really. You can't control cash and how people use it, but is like from a devil's advocate, what are the pros for it, and then the negatives against this system that everyone is investigating and America's doing it.
I guess the pro essentially is that you're going to have a continuous access to funds regardless. So your bank system's not going to go down. Also, no, RBA is never going to go down. So the money's always going to be there.
That security that they're not going to fold.
Exactly, it's not going to fold because banks operate on a fractional reserve systems that. You put your $100 in the bank and 90% is probably lent out already anyway as is. So if everyone makes a run at the bank, then
and we've seen that in the US and even with
Valley Bank and
and you saw it with even trading platforms. I think one of the US trading platforms even had that when everyone tried to extract their money and then they had to freeze it because they just don't have it on hand.
Yeah, but I think the other thing we've got to realize is that the banks are already tracking how we use our money anyway, in the fact that they're able to make the calls and shut accounts and track where we're going, even withdrawing X amount of cash from the thing. And if you want to deposit $10,000 cash, they're going to report it to Austrac already anyway. So the system's already against our favour in terms of if you want privacy, you want anonymity, you want all that kind of thing. It's very, very hard to do so in the existing system.
Yeah.
Unless that cash gets taken out and it's taken out completely. The RBA estimates probably at 5% of all currency in circulation is used for illegal purposes. So $100 billion of banknotes printed, you're looking at $5 billion in cash that's used for illegal purposes.
And if can we drill that? Do you see it as a potential current? Like, is there a particular currency? Like, you see, talk about US and hundreds?
Australian
$100. Yeah.
And also on top of that, a decent chunk of our currency is also held overseas as well. So our physical banknotes, especially mostly 50s and 100s, are held. I think 80% of our notes, by value, are 50s and 100s. But the usage of them is limited because when you go, let's say you use a $100 note,
you got to get a lot of change.
But that $100 note doesn't recirculate. It actually has a modeled useful life of 220 years which is crazy because either you're using it once and that's it, or people will take the money and then they store it, and that's until whenever they need it as such. So I guess it's a big, CBDCs can help, I guess, facilitate transfers quicker, e-commerce, and especially if you're going to use cross-border transfers. And I think it's so hard to send money to another account overseas. If that allows us to do that easier without having to use PayPal or anything like that, great, whatever. But you also got to realize when you, and the paper has said that in the discussion papers, like, for as much people worry about privacy the most, people end up giving up that privacy for the benefit of convenience. Yeah, which is a bit of a paradox. But the more we tend to want we actually end up valuing convenience over privacy. And
massively.
And it's a little bit concerning because we're willing to give up that little bit of privacy to get our lives sorted out quicker, be more efficient, and whatever. So it's a catch-22 situation.
Yeah, well, and that's where you see the discussion of decentralized finance, and that's where the crypto and the blockchain enthusiasts really come to it, because they're again looking at a system outside of an organization controlling it, and it's a completely decentralized. Where even I remember when I first sort of started understanding that everyone had the association, or crypto was used for illicit and black market. And it was almost the complete opposite, because everything is tracked within a T, and you can't really hide anything. And that was that almost attack and discrediting that system. And I see all of those really emerging, and at the end of the day, it ends up what people want to do and transact.
But I think the problem with DeFi is that it needs to shake off its label where it's a speculative kind of thing, where people still see it as a speculative asset rather than
utility,
utility, a form of exchange, where you go back to the very basics where people were bartering and stuff. That it's a new form of decentralized finance where the financial system is away from the institutions. It's taken away. It's done by by crypto, by blockchain, and all that kind of thing. So. There probably needs to be more common acceptance to show people, and I guess it comes down to communication. This is how it actually works in your day-to-day life. Because I don't think that communication is there whatsoever. And so people are just like, Bitcoin, I'm just going to invest my money in there and see what happens. Not so much hey, I'm going to use this crypto to go and buy some food from this market, and I'm going to just app to do that. So see what happens. I'm not sure. I still got a lot more to learn about crypto.
Oh, 100%. And all that. Well, and that's where I also, just now thinking out loud, the cryptocurrencies, they're all coins and they're virtual. You don't actually own them. Do you reckon that's had any impact on, I guess, people's psychology of now actually wanting to have and collect coins as well? And do you see them potentially sort of pushing each other in some way? I mean, that's me thinking out loud.
It's funny because people have actually made physical Bitcoins before. So there's someone, like, you can have the actual key on a coin for Bitcoin, and it'd be like one Bitcoin, and that one coin still is worth $60,000.
90,000.
Exactly. So there's actually a blurring of worlds because some people like to still hold physical currency. So there's actually Bitcoin notes and Bitcoin coins, physical coins, whatever. But I think they're seen as more collectible items than anything else. Whether it pushes one or the other out, I think it's very early to tell, to see, especially when you've got physical currencies, you've got electronic payments, you've got DeFi. Who's going to push who out?
Yeah.
Time will only tell.
Yeah, and I think that's what you said about the transactions of people just wanting that convenience, and that's the whole idea of removing intermediaries, really, and that's sort of a threat to the financial system, because you see it with everything. You buy something online now, there's always a hidden, not a hidden fee, but there is a fee for transacting your money, and you just sort of go, why am I doing this? And we've talked about it before, is that the almost association with, when you used to hold cash, there was a risk that you might lose it. And that's kind of balancing it out, because you get a 47%, not a 47%, but a certain percent taken out of your payment. But that was almost the association that you would have had that risk holding cash as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down to opportunity costs overall. So if a business, there was one guy said a few weeks ago saying, the amount of fees I've got to pay in transaction fees I've got to pay to the banks is the same as hiring one person for an entire day. Is it worth me paying? I mean, I think this guy was turning over $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. If your rate is 2.2%, that's already $600-$700. Is that worth $700? Then compared to collecting cash, going to waiting in line, going to banks, sorting out, etc. So it's again that time value of money concept, where am I willing to pay an extra few percent as a business so that I don't have to go to the bank?
Yeah, that convenience again.
And I think some businesses are realizing now it's actually not worth it because they're too high. But also at the same time, what I don't understand is why businesses don't price in their transaction costs in the product already, rather than making people annoyed that, oh, it's $10. Oh, no, wait, it's $10.22.
Yes.
When you tap in. Why can't you just price that in? It's annoying. So, like, for example, I'm the treasurer of a career club. We price everything in. We don't charge an FPOS fee because it's already priced into your
Yeah,
product.
because you get told, oh, $22, and then
Exactly.
you get your bank and it's like 22, 23 or something like that.
Because people aren't going to notice if you put up your prices by 10, 20, 50 cents on a product. But people, and it's psychologically, people get annoyed that,
Yes, when you're paying more.
I'm prepared to pay $10 and now I'm paying $10.22. What the hell is going on here? So it's going to come down to businesses being a bit more smart of how they operate that. If they want people to accept to use more card, then do the right thing and price it into your product rather than adding it as a surcharge on top of your thing, right? At the same time, it's also businesses should also provide a fee-free way of payment, but unfortunately, that's got to come with government legislation. The ACCC have said when you are stating the terms of payment, you've got to make it clearly in a sign, but there's no obligation that they need to provide a fee-free form of payment in there, which is a misconception that a lot of people think, oh no, by law you have to. There's actually no law that states that whatsoever, because legal tender is very different to terms of contract.
Yeah.
So legal tender is the official form of currency that a country prints, whereas the terms of contract is essentially when you come to basic contract law, you going to Woolies and buying a cherry ripe is you're already engaged in a contract, and then Woolies states the form of payment that you engage, whether it be cash, everyday rewards, wallet, card, whatever it is from there. So partly it's going to come down to businesses, but also partly it probably needs to be some sort of government intervention from the ACCC or the Treasury saying, no, you've actually got to provide a fee-free form of payment as a form of payment, because you are marginalising certain groups of people who don't know. You got disabled people, you've got elderly, you got a few other groups of people that just can't use digital forms of payment. So you should not be discriminating in that way.
Interesting.
To away from their ability to pay for a product.
Well, we've also heard, again, with all the difficulties going on in Australia and globally with, cost of living. And you've even heard, Coles and Woolies almost backtracking on their but self-service checkouts because of, the fact that no one's there to exchange the transaction, that people are just leaving and taking stuff. And I thought that was quite an interesting reverse because then you're going back to, well, you're seeing someone, you're paying with a cash or card, and that, again, if it starts at the top, does it filter down? I mean, where do you see where would the pressures come from if like a group like that suddenly starts going, oh, we want more? They're pretty much dictated by their customers, but where do you see each end sort of meeting?
Well, one of the interesting things, I went to Perth Airport Woolies last night, and it's good Woolies because they open at 5 a.m. in the morning and close at 10 p.m. every day,
that's
which
right.
is pretty sweet. But
one of probably the only ones in Perth, at least.
Because it's on federal land, so they can do what they want. But so it's like Costco and all them are able to open whatever times because of the land they're on.
Interesting.
But there was only one person supervising 20 self-checkouts. So how's that possible? How are you meant to mitigate loss and from stealing and damage and whatever for that one person? Whereas before, if you had 20 different counters, you had 20 different checkpoints in there. I think the problem is we went too far in the self-checkout way where, before it used to be like maybe 6, 8, 10 max where one person is. Now you're bringing down to 3 or 4 like normal serve checkouts and 20 self-serve checkouts. Even the ones in the city are like 90% self-serve checkouts, but you've only got one person because.
And it was the reverse. So you look at the fast food joints that do it. At least you're paying for it and then receiving it.
That's it.
Which I guess stops that barrier if you can't just steal. Whereas the Coles and Woolies and I haven't been to Aldi as frequently, but some of those went the opposite. And same with Bunnings, and a lot of them get your goods then pay, which incentivise that. Well, I can see if I can get away with it, and then they started adding cameras and deterrents, but. I don't really know the top line if it's stopping people.
Yeah, and it's crazy because the technology that's used in self-service checkouts is insane now, where they've got cameras overlooking and they stop you to think that you're stealing or something like that. And then that creates a sense of distrust within the customer who feels, well, I feel like I'm a little bit violated because even though I haven't done the wrong thing, you assume this machine assumes.
Well, and even when you get a certain fruit and veg product and you go to the gallery and you're like a few different peppers or a few different chilies and you're like, or bananas, and you're like, oh, I don't actually remember which one I got or which bit, and it's like, you almost get that intrinsic, am I actually doing the wrong thing?
And I think it needs to come down to those supermarkets actually, and and even retail, like Kmart does the same now, and Target are like, find that balance, because if you're losing a lot of money for people stealing, and not just like blatantly stealing, but also checking the wrong item or whatever like that, then they probably know the reason why they've probably they've gone the wrong direction in the first place.
And I mean, I've seen so many videos online pretty much saying that, you know, there's the memes supposedly of, you know, people being like, I went to the checkout and I paid, you know, 150, but then I went to the self-service and I paid 10. And sort of that joke of like, you know, and then you see that sprawled across social media and it almost incentivizes, encourages that behavior. And it's almost, the onus is now on Woolies. You always think it's a great idea, but then when you think of the consequences of it, it's naturally what happens. But if we segue back to the cash side of it, you said before that the institutions, the RBA and even the Perth Mint, are being a little bit more adventurous and thinking outside the box in regards to releases and also how they can service the global market.
Yes.
I mean, what are some of the ways in which they're being active in trying to at least get some revenue? Because they're also, I think, self-funded, at least
so
the Perth Mint.
The Royal Australian Mint's fully self-funded.
Yeah.
The Perth Mint's pretty much treated like as a government enterprise rather than a government agency, whereas the Royal Australian Mint is a government agency.
Okay.
And also then obviously Note Printing Australia is a business which is an arm of the RBA. So last week when I went to Melbourne, I went and visited Note Printing Australia premises, and I was chatting to the community engagement officer and said because of declining cash usage, they're now trying to become a global printer to go against those like De La Rue and Aurelia Facility, all these big name banknote printers. So they're currently printing notes for Solomon Islands and Vanuatu and Singapore and Brunei. And when I was there, they're printing Filipino banknotes. So they're printing 1,000 peso notes currently in Australia. So to be able to do that and to diversify their interests means that they can actually still operate as such in those countries that are still high cash usage. But we're finding in Southeast Asia, for example, their use of digital payments is also accelerating quite quickly through the use of QR codes and such as well. The Royal Australian Mint, all they're doing is just pumping out coin collector releases because demand for coins is reduced. And on top of that, they're not making coins for many other countries. They do for maybe Papua New Guinea and a couple other countries, but they don't make many other coins or something Solomon Islands. But they're not big enough customers to maintain the feasibility of the Mint running. And I think when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister, he was actually looking at privatising the Royal Australian Mint due to the reduction of usage of coinage. And so the coin collector market increased significantly since 2020, but the Royal Australian Mint hasn't been innovative in what they do, and they do not have the staff on hand to dispatch releases quickly. So they'll release a new coin. If they're releasing and you buy from them directly, it takes them 1 month to send out the coins to the collector. Whereas why would I go buy from there when I can go to another dealer and they can send it out to me within the week?
Yeah.
So that is just really annoying, and people are getting really frustrated with the Royal Australian Mint. They've had a lot of personnel change at the moment, and they're looking to improve. But when you operate a government agency, there's so much. I know you've watched Utopia and all those.
Yeah, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of
Perth Mint, on the other hand, they're unique because they're a bullion-based dealer, and I know they had their issues from last year, but they've pretty much gone on top of that. They've regained trust of the investors and all that kind of thing. But because of the buying and selling gold is so popular and will always continue to be, they'll be fine. Essentially, people will continue to invest, and their collectible products are extremely innovative as well on top of that. So of those three organisations, the one that's probably of the least threat is the Perth Mint. The one that's probably the most threat of being made redundant would probably be the Royal Australian Mint.
Interesting.
In there, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas Note Printing Australia, they don't just print banknotes as well. They also print passports, death certificates, birth certificates, and a whole bunch of things. So they're still going to be used in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'd recommend people go back to our previous discussion.
Yeah.
I think around episode between 60 and 80, something like that. Because we talked about all the security features and a lot of the interesting, I guess, observations that you wouldn't notice unless you knew about it. But talking now about the actual investment, because of course this show is predominantly about investing and where it comes from. You're talking about releases that are coming out. I'd just like to pick your brain quickly, just to put perspective. What have been some of the high value coins? What have been some of the trends?
Yeah.
I mean, I know for you it's a hobby and you love the story,
of course,
and you're sort of, I guess, in that torn position of seeing the investment community come in and I guess sort of capitalize on it in a way. But I mean, putting that out there, I mean, what have been some of the, I guess, potential staggering values that are coming through in some of these coins? Yeah,
a couple of the ones that pumped up pretty quickly have been like the new King Charles coins. So, for example, Perth Mint released their bullion version of the King or the silver bullion coin, and it had the first one with Charles on it, and that was a big line in front of the Perth Mint that morning. That was very, very popular. and it's still holding its value. It's still holding its value quite well. Unfortunately, new releases this year and in the last year have just not gained value whatsoever.
Interesting.
So what people are doing again are just literally buying gold and silver, and they're actually back investing into pre-decimal coins, finding the actual rare stuff and demanding that. And same bang, there's actually the banknote market has actually strengthened a little bit as well recently, like the paper notes. People actually are now buying them at a bit more over the market value, and also uncut banknotes. So banknotes that are in blocks of like 2, 4, 8 or full sheets.
Oh.
They've actually gone up in quite a lot of value recently.
How do you get those?
Back in the 90s, the Reserve Bank used to sell them as products.
Interesting. So like a full sheet of
notes.
without being cut out, without...
Yeah, exactly. And then roll them up and put them in a tube.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm trying to think of just walking out with like almost a poster.
So they'll roll up, put a tube. Those have been pretty strong, and the auction results have shown they've been pushing 20 to 30% above estimate, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty good, yeah.
But yeah, I think we're seeing a bit of renaissance in the pre-decimal sector at the moment, where we're seeing those genuine collectors from before and those investors who are looking to buy something that's real and unique and rare. They're still putting money into those. And when those rare items come out, the interest is just huge. Like the 1930 penny, some of the old Sydney Mint sovereigns and all that kind of thing. Demand will always be strong because those that want to buy will pour money into those things and will get what they want. They will just want, if they want it, they'll just pay whatever it is they want for it from there. So the old stuff is probably holding its value more so. The modern issues are actually, they'll have a sharp rise just after release, and they'll push back towards retail, if not lower than that. And so we're seeing a lot of items that sort of went double to triple retail within a month. They're now pushing back to retail this year. So it's more, and so a lot of people saying it's a buyer's market at the moment rather than a seller's market. But I guess when it comes to investment and what's been going strong, it's been the old stuff, or it's just been gold and silver.
Interesting. And I mean, you're predominantly focused, at least mostly on Australian coins and currency. But I'd like to know, from the external point of view, the global market, who else is leading the charge? Do you keep an eye on if it's China or the US or Europe? I mean, where are some of the bigger players coming into it and looking at? I mean, how would you say? What's the most rare coin in some regard?
Well, I think the biggest market by far is the American numismatic market. The coin collector market is absolutely insane. I think to the point where collectors can get accredited and go through courses and diplomas to
full education, full sort of specialising
in that area, which I wish we had here. That we could.
That's something you're going to have to do from the sounds.
I hope one day we'd be able to get to a stage where we can do that. To the point that some Australian dealers and collectors are going to America for a few weeks at a time just to study and get these courses done, to get grading courses and history courses and all that kind of thing. Their coin show, so today, for example, we've got a big coin show happening in Brisbane at the moment. But the big shows in America, it's like the Long Beach Expo in California, they'll be like size of the convention center in Perth. Like that's how big it is. And because American coinage has such an amazing history, from the late 1700s right to now, the amount of variety and design, they've got so many weird designs, so many weird denominations, so many awesome coins around them that it's so rich in history that no one will ever top the American numismatic market from there. And what we've got to realize is that Australia is still a pretty young country. Britain has also got a relatively good one, but it's nowhere near as strong as the United States. I guess Britain's got a longer history than the United States, but it's sort of like your Antiques Roadshow type of crowd. It's the same small group of people, whereas America is just like people young and old are fully getting immersed into the hobby, and they've always been immersed in the hobby because there's always been the resources there to support collectors. Whereas Australia, we don't, and so it's weird now that we're facing as collectors in Australia, where the coin collecting has faced this renaissance, first time since the 80s, where, we've got all these things now, but because everyone's dealers are so segmented and collectors are so segmented, and the reason why people collecting is so segmented, we don't have this universal approach to show where we're going. That said, in terms of an interconnected, collectors world, there's organisations like the International Banknote Society. They're really good. They've got chapters all around the world. There's a chapter in Perth. They have meetings every month in the chapters, and they have national meetings, and they have international conferences, and they share their notes. But the problem with that one is the average age of those chapters are pushing 70 and 80, and there's no one else
coming through the ranks.
Yeah, I remember I went to a meeting in Perth a year or two ago, and I was like, by far the youngest person by like 20 years in there.
Yeah. Bring the average age down a bit.
But also they weren't reluctant to change as an organization. They weren't reluctant. They're reluctant to listen to new ideas. And I was like, I'll be a member still, but I'm not coming to meetings because you guys don't want to change. So the problem is unless they look to adapt and build in their networks, we're not going to see, that's going to start falling away. India's a really good market. Malaysia and Singapore is also pretty strong in the banknote region.
So they're more predominantly banknote instead of coins.
Yeah, rather than coins, yeah. Like Malaysia and Singapore, the banknote market is very, very, very strong. Because not just the different types of notes, but also the serial numbers, like numbers that like go like the same number all the way through. Like
so the real inner details of the currency.
And like, and so they always have strong auction results. Hong Kong's also pretty strong as well. So like I said, America doesn't tops everyone all over. But the Asian market is also pretty strong as well in the same point.
Well, and I think out loud now, your audience that you've captivated, you went from, again, when you started, 2020, and it's, at least on TikTok, over 130,000 followers. Instagram, not
75,
75, and you've spoken on Hamish and Andy, which I remember that's pretty good because they even started their own coin and they're quite interested in it. But you just see that all it almost takes is a few of those people getting out there speaking the gospel.
Yeah.
And almost in a funny way, if Netflix or one of these streaming services did like a show on it, I remember there was a collectible one of the US talking about basketball cards, and then it's NBA jerseys, and suddenly there's this astronomical value associated with it. But as soon as you captivate that new market, then there's that interest. And how have you managed to do that through your growth over 3 years, which is now getting you seen and taken all over the world?
Yeah, I think the big part for me is the sustainability of the hobby moving forward, and that it doesn't become a flash in the pan thing. We're seeing a big increase in collectibles, not just coins, but Pokemon cards, basketball, footy cards as well. So all those. So how do we keep that new generation in us? So I guess from my point of view is, doing all the videos, getting as many media opportunities I can do, and I guess speak the good word about it, and just sort of getting, and then also doing a lot of work with the coin dealers around and sort of get them on the same path as I'm going. So it's great you can take advantage of the rise in the collectibles over 2022 and you made big profits then. But if you don't maintain the hobby and you don't ensure its sustainability, then the hobby's going to die as quickly as it rose in there. So for me at the moment and I guess for now at the moment I'm currently doing a lot of work for the Perth Mint at the moment. And so getting more people engaged with the hobby and talking about behind the scenes kind of things and whatever. Hopefully can get some work. I'm going to be meeting with Note Printing Australia later in the year again.
Very nice.
They want to do some school engagement stuff, which is really cool because they look at the design technology point of view, like design and so showing people that currency applies to many aspects of life. It's not just as a form of payment, but it's art, it's design, it's science, it's mathematics, it's
bringing a lot of things together.
There's so many disciplines in all that, and I guess the teacher side of me is just really showing that passion through. Because if people like someone who's passionate about something, because then they get engaged and they learn something new. And like this, I think, and I guess with my following, they're not big coin collectors. I think they're coin curious.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth holding on to because they might find something that they might like. They might buy one thing every 6 months or something rather than buying every new release. And that's fine because if you've got more people who are curious about their hobby, they're more likely to be engaged rather than just actually shutting and gatekeeping those people out, which the coin collector base used to do back in the 90s.
Well, and given your audience, the community is growing. Yeah. And you said it might not necessarily be from a pure investment or hobby or just more learning, like the fun facts. And I think that's why I also love some of the content you post because you make it also engaging and interesting, but it's really talking about the history of money without, it's probably where you got the name. But it's fascinating. And for those that are interested in following you and, I know we've talked about before, don't message you to find out what the value of their collection is. But I mean, where can they go to follow you and keep an eye on your movements and activities?
I guess firstly, if you do want to find out what your coins and notes are worth, go and search Australian Numismatic Dealers Association and just go for and search for all the dealers that are available. There's some great dealers in Perth. Sterling Currency, Andrew Crellin's a really great bloke who operates out of Fremantle, who's really good. But I guess to follow me on @thehistory_of_money on Instagram because someone took the history of money. And then on TikTok, I'm the history of money. But yeah, I'll be around in a minute. I've got a new episode of Hard Quiz coming out June 19th.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so hopefully a little bit of redemption that happens then.
I did hear, but I haven't watched the clip, but I heard about it.
Yeah, so I'll be back on Hard Quiz in June, and you'll probably Yeah, I'll probably be around a meeting. I'll probably be back on Hamish and Andy at some point this year as well.
Super good.
So yeah, hopefully they get that dollar coin out. It'll be pretty sweet when they do.
Yeah. And see if you can get one as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then bring it in. But no, thank you so much, Joel.
worries.
It's I don't know if they call you Joel or the history of money. I guess both interchangeable, but it's always interesting, these conversations. It's it's a different realm for me and probably the audience as well. But that's why I see the investing sphere. And again, it's probably a discredit to the hobby and there's interest as well. But it's a different area to explore. And I think, we've covered a fair bit. So thank you so much for speaking on the show.
Thanks, Bennett. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Market Bull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.